This week's episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast is brought to you by Sugar CRM. If your sales team is struggling to close deals, Sugar CRM can introduce you to modern, insight-driven sales. Energize your CRM with Sugar. Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me this week are Jeff Reinke and Anna Wells. We're the editors of Manufacturing.net in Industrial Equipment News, and we each have more than 20 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week, we take the 5 most popular stories on our websites and discuss the implications they have on the industry going forward. But before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine so you can join us when we go live every Thursday. Jeff, how are you doing this week?
I'm great, David. How are you?
You're great? I'm great. I'm as great as I am every week. No idea where that came from. That's not, you can't make sense of these things sometimes.
Let it go, man.
I will.
Let it go.
That's what David does. He lets stuff go.
I will let it go. Anna, how are you doing this week?
Doing great, thanks.
Yeah? How's the new puppy?
He's good.
Yeah?
He's like a lot of crazy, but that's fun.
It's good. You know, I mean, what's a little more or a lot of more crazy when you already have a lot of little kids in the house, you know?
Yeah, it did. I mean, it did just added like a small layer. That's all. I mean, I feel like the learning curve here is just like, what's one more?
That's right. Well, good luck to you. Before we get started, we have a word from our new sponsor, Sugar CRM. This episode is brought to you by Sugar CRM. Many manufacturers sit on mountains of customer data. However, far too few sales teams leverage this data to unlock hidden sales opportunities, boost pipeline performance, and strengthen customer relationships. If your sales team is struggling to close deals, this new paper from Sugar CRM can be your introduction to modern, insight-driven sales. Download How to Close More Deals in Manufacturing right now. There is a link in the body copy as well as in the live chat. Our first story this week. FDA hiring contractors to replace fired staff who supported safety inspections. At first, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said job cuts at the Department of Health and Human Services wouldn't hit safety inspectors who oversee U.S. foods and drugs. While those employees remain at the FDA, many in support roles are gone. According to the AP, this includes people who booked international trips to remote Indian pharmaceutical plants, lab scientists who tested food samples for contamination, and communication specialists who alerted the public to urgent safety recalls. Now, the FDA is rushing plans to hire outside contractors to replace fired workers, starting with those who book foreign travel. The FDA has struggled to ramp up inspections after many longtime staffers resigned or retired during the COVID-19 pandemic. Jeff, you know, no one ever appreciates the role players until they're gone.
Well, at least you should appreciate the role, even if you're not going to focus on the people here. I mean, this, you know, I feel like it's an easy target, and me personally, I don't want to be like constantly bashing this administration. It's not always fair. So I'm going to rely on that quote that I got from basic training by my drill sergeant. Excellent initiative, poor execution. Yeah. The initiative here to trim government, just trim government and get rid of the bloated bureaucracy is something we can all get behind. But again and again, the execution is so flawed. And that's what happened here. Again, I think the article also cited something like a 36% deficiency in terms of inspections that should be completed, but we can't because we don't have enough people. So now you're putting more on these inspectors in terms of paperwork and travel and everything else when they're having trouble doing their core job in and of itself. So again, not just poor execution, but more like stop talking private, drop and do push-ups type of poor execution. I mean, this is really bad. Plus, when you take into account, now when you start digging into like recalls and the work that the FDA does with food and drug safety, it gets kind of convoluted. It can get kind of sticky to figure out exactly how many recalls and what counts as a recall and what was a new one versus one that was pre-existing, using very conservative numbers. The FDA has about 500 food recalls every year. Mm-hmm. There's about 300 drug recalls every year. Again, very conservative numbers. You're the math guy, David. Mm-hmm. But I believe that's a total of 800 at least recalls to manage every year.
That checks out.
And then you need to communicate to people who are from harvesting to distributing to delivering to selling to eating these products, consuming these products.
Yeah.
I would think communication would be kind of important there.
Yeah.
Like, why would you look at that part of that whole thing to eliminate? I can see maybe travel or administrative roles, but when it comes to communicating this information, there's a lot going on there. That's at least, again, you're the math guy, that's at least 2 a day. Yeah. You need to get out there and communicate to a lot of different stakeholders. So this one is a definite head scratcher, but it's even more surprising when you have a guy like Elon Musk running Doge, that he would actually look at people who communicate with the public as being unimportant. I think may have been the most shocking part of this story.
Well, even, and we've talked about it since the beginning of this podcast, we have always talked about how this, the FDA in particular, is understaffed. Even when these positions were filled, like, they were still overwhelmed. And I think that this is a good look at how, they tried to streamline things by doing things programmatically. They noticed that a lot of these titles had words like policy and regulation in them, and then just kind of cut from there rather than even taking the 5 bullet point approach to things. But one thing that stood out to me, Anna, was that they're hiring contractors now to kind of fill these roles. In your opinion, what is the likelihood that these contractors are cheaper and more efficient?
Yeah, I think that we will find out pretty quickly how much the government is going to have to pay to replace folks that are doing jobs that are already notoriously difficult to fill, because the pay is described in this article as, I think, lackluster or something.
Yeah.
So something very middling. The jobs are very demanding and difficult. I think the easiest people to find for these jobs are the people that already have them. Mm-hmm. They also have the most experience, turns out.
Yeah.
So I think that will be a big challenge. And I also think it's kind of the way these some of these roles are being characterized as support staff. To your point, Jeff, this is a very complex system, how this all fits together. People who test samples for contamination in a lab are considered not required in this. This is something that we can, we'll figure out later, because to me that shuts down the whole thing.
Yeah.
And we're actually seeing that take place now. So the pressure is on now, right? As of Monday, it was announced that the FDA had suspended its milk quality testing program as a byproduct of some layoffs that happened within the FDA. I just want to jog back to a situation that came to mind. I don't know if everybody remembers this, probably not. It was back in 2013, but there was a salmonella outbreak during a government shutdown. And it was considered at the time to be kind of a worst case scenario that could have taken place while food safety workers were furloughed from that agency. And at the time, the CDC was operating with about a third of its staff on the job. And it had to bring back 30 furloughed employees in its foodborne division to help handle the outbreak. By the time it had sickened 278 people in 18 states. So, and also at the time, experts were questioning whether the lack of that personnel actually hampered the agency's ability to issue a timely recall. Mm-hmm. And so I think we have to think about the fact that we've already been through this before. We kind of know how the story ends. If we don't get in front of this stuff, it can quickly get out of control. If there's no communications department, if there's no lab testing people, if you think you can do it a better way, you can't have that gap though. You'd have to overlap that change.
There needs to be a transition.
So to me, I think it's a little bit pie in the sky to think that we can, just because it's a third party contractor, first of all, that we can find people that are qualified and capable and willing to do these jobs for less money. I think that's like a little bit short sighted and maybe naive.
Yeah.
And then secondly, this is a very, very serious place that we are. And so this is not something that we can take lightly, that will just manage itself in the meantime while we are figuring it out.
True. While we figure it out, that means people are also getting sick and potentially having worse consequences than that. So what is best case scenario? Because these are very specialized skill sets in a lot of these situations. Is the ideal that a lot of these people will want to come back as contractors and will wind up getting a deal just because they'll come on as a contract worker without any benefits or anything like that? Is that like what we're hoping? Because who are you going to hire?
No, it's a great question. I don't know. The one thing that I think about too, there's a lot of recalls that are actually instituted not by any government agency, but by the company themselves.
Yeah.
And the FDA has always been good about communicating those things. So we've already sort of put some pressure on food and drug makers to be self-policing, but now we're actually almost forcing them to take on additional responsibilities as well in terms of communicating that or even testing some of these products too. Some are going to be conscientious and good actors. How many aren't?
Yeah.
So I think there's also some real surprises here that the market is being almost asked to figure out by themselves when you've got people who are going to be all over the board, across the board in terms of the level that they're going to want to contribute.
Well, and another thing that was a point of contention for me in this article was that unlike some of these other places where we are trying to trim waste or find waste, try to trim spending, except the Defense Department, because we'll never touch that. The FDA had a plan in place. They had a plan like, okay, these are, less essential workers that we can live without. And they had a plan that they could have enacted. And they just said, nope, we're going the other way, and decided to cut different people. I mean, and Anna, you raised this point as well, but the article stated efforts to recruit new inspectors have been stymied by the demands of the job, months of travel, modest pay, and grueling work under challenging overseas conditions. I mean, is this part of the problem? Like public service? I mean, the idea that these people are doing a lot for little pay, for the greater good. I mean, is that like suspicious now? The fact that there's been Ezra Klein has the new book Abundance out. No, it's not Ezra Klein's book. It's the Moneyball guy has a new book out about how all these workers, do this as a labor of love for the greater good. And it's just, I don't understand why we are sometimes blaming these people or saying they're part of the problem when, they are essentially government role players that play a really big role in keeping the wheels turning.
Yeah, and I think this idea of this vast government bloat is, maybe not always backed up with data.
Yeah.
Like, maybe it's a lack of understanding of what the roles are and what they do and how it all fits together.
Yeah.
I mean, could we cut costs? Probably, but there may be a consequence to that.
True. And I get it.
It takes time.
It takes time. Yeah.
Right.
And it's like,
and method, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and you have 4 years to get it done. You got to get it done now so you can see real benefit sooner than later, right? But it's, sometimes it's not always good to like move fast and break things, because sometimes the broken things cause a lot of big problems.
Well, when you've got people that are taking things from the private sector and trying to translate it apples to apples to the public sector, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You just can't do that. I don't even know why you would need to explain that, but it's just the way it works. I mean, it's common sense.
Well, our next most popular story, L3 Harris expands Indiana facility to support America's Golden Dome. L3 Harris Technologies recently completed a $125 million expansion at its space manufacturing facility in Fort Wayne, Indiana. The project supports the Department of Defense's need for on-orbit technology designed to protect the U.S. with a, quote, Golden Dome. According to Design and Development Today, the expanded 95,000 square foot facility will support engineering, integration, testing, and program management for L3 Harris's missile defense programs. The development also supports increased satellite production capacity for civil weather programs for global customers. L3 Harris's president of Space and Airborne Systems, Ed Zoyce, says upping their capacity to produce 48 payloads per year will help deliver at the scale and speed defense customers require. L3 Harris has 5 satellites on orbit and 34 satellites in the works for the Space Development Agency's Tracking Layer and the Missile Defense Agency's Hypersonic and Ballistic Tracking Space Sensor, or HBTSS, program. So, Jeff, this will be an interesting project to watch. You know, like, do you think this is going to come to fruition? Will we see an actual golden dome in the way that it is conceived?
So I want to preface this statement by sort of reverting back to what I made in the last story. This is a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a really good idea. But these types of things are typically not created through an executive order.
Yeah.
Okay. This is something the Department of Defense should be working on and saying, going to Congress and saying, we want money to do this for these reasons, as opposed to an executive order that says, and I got to read this, in 60 days, the Secretary of Defense shall submit to the President a reference architecture, capabilities-based requirements, and implementation plan for the next generation missile defense shield. This is all technology, just to be clear, we don't have yet. Mm-hmm. We don't know how to do this. The closest thing is the Iron Dome that Israel uses. And just to put some context around that, Israel's Iron Dome guards an area the size of New Jersey.
Yeah.
Not the continental United States plus Alaska and Hawaii.
That's all flat too.
Yeah. This is more complicated, especially when you're talking about the type of missile you're defending against. We're not dealing with the types of speeds that Israel is dealing with. They're talking about their neighbors dropping bombs from next door.
Yeah.
These are coming from across the globe, traveling at hypersonic speeds. So a completely different ballgame. You essentially, what people much smarter than I are projecting is something like 16,000 satellites that are going to need to understand exactly when these missiles are launched or hit them within 3 to 5 seconds from the time they're launched to even have a prayer of shooting them down.
Yeah.
That's complicated.
Yeah.
That isn't going to be done.
They just need, they need 5 bullets in 60 days as to how it's going to be done.
So this is off to a tough start.
Yeah.
Because the demands that are being placed on the powers that be to actually come up with a game plan to building this thing, it's ridiculous, and it's just not going to happen. So this is the first step.
Yeah.
We've got a facility that is going to be set up by one contractor to potentially go about creating this technology. It is going to take a huge group effort, and that's even under debate because there's a lot of people who are saying, well, we can sort of repackage a lot of the things we have and update them, upgrade them. It's more than just a fresh coat of paint. It's more complex than that, obviously. But we can do a lot of those things. There's other people that are saying, no, this is way more complex. We're basically starting from scratch. The executive order even made reference to Star Wars from the Reagan administration.
Okay.
That didn't work.
Yeah.
And that's because this is very complex and very expensive, and it takes a lot of people working together. So how this goes from here is going to be extremely interesting because not only do we have to develop the technology, one of the things also that stood out in the executive order, sorry to keep going back to this, was the development of a secure supply chain for all the components and equipment. We don't have the technology yet, but we need to have a definitive guide on the supply chain. Mm-hmm. You see where I'm going here? Like we're getting so far ahead of ourselves in the development of this. I don't know how it's going to get started here because I don't know. Nobody knows where to start, but yet there's all this pressure to make it happen.
Yeah. I mean, I understand we need to lay out a foundation. We need to move fast on this because I do understand like this is a direct response to how slow government moves and how fed up people are with how slow government moves. So I get it. You win a lot of points by saying like, let's move on this. But I do, even L3 Harris said in the announcement, like, okay, we have this investment. It's going to be $125 million expansion. But best case scenario, at the second half of your second administration here, things will be online. So it's like, I think that it's like, we're ready to roll
for
soon.
Something.
Yeah. And it's, but I get it. Anna, it's, one thing about this story is that there is something about like the necessity of a Golden Dome that just in the preparation for a Golden Dome seems to reinforce this sort of isolationist approach that America is taking currently.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, as Jeff was saying, I think that it is an idea that in theory is very cool. And I think people are like, yeah, if we can prevent being hit by a missile.
Yeah.
Great.
I don't think, no one's pro missile strike.
Right. No one is. But a few things here, and Jeff covered a lot of it too. I think it to me also has a lot of practical challenges. When you look at that 16,000 number of how many satellites they want to put up there, or they think that they would need to even make this close to effective. I read an NPR report that said, in order to ensure you have a satellite in position above the right patch of Earth, you need a lot of things in space in order to have them at the right place at the right time. So, yeah, that is a big undertaking. We don't know if it's going to work. We don't know if there are potential risks from like shooting things down from that vantage point and like maybe getting it wrong. And, there's a lot to figure out. The other thing that I don't know. I can see why companies like L3 Harris, and I know there's other space companies and that are trying to get, make bids on this project. I can see why that is appealing to them because it is a lot of money. Mm-hmm. It's going to be very, very costly. It's a lot of equipment. To me, I was getting some kind of border wall vibes from this whole thing. Like there was a ton of bids for those contracts when this was rolled out, and it was like, we have all this money, we're going to do it. And then it got halted by the next administration because it was so expensive, and it just, I'm getting that a little bit from this, maybe that I don't know if it's going to work. And I think when you look at L3 Harris's vantage point here. So the article says that they have completed this $125 million expansion.
Yeah. Recently completed the expansion. Yeah.
Okay. So the executive order was issued in January, end of January. Mm-hmm. That's what this was for.
I mean, the foresight.
Then they just threw this together.
Yeah,
in response?
I mean, L3 has a lot of things going on. The space could have been dedicated for anything. I mean, we also have to consider that when they ramp up, they said 48 a year, and we're talking about 16,000 that'll be required. So it is a tremendous opportunity for a lot of people in that space. Pun not intended, but then halfway intended.
Yeah, to all get involved.
But do you think part of this was that they were hoping basically they would take the business plan or the game plan for Starlink and then just kind of white out Starlink and then put Golden Dome and then put it in? Because at least Starlink does have 7,000 satellites currently in the, on orbit.
Yeah.
So maybe...
I don't think they're the same satellites, though.
No.
And again, I understand the order was just to put the plan in place.
Yeah.
So I get that. That's where I have concerns that it's just off to a bad start. Mm-hmm. There's not even funding for this yet. They're waiting for the 2026 budget to get all the funding. So yeah, I think L3 Harris is sort of like, hey, we're here first.
I agree. I think they're just raising their hand. This is like nothing more than that. They're just raising their hand and being like, hey, if we get there, like think about us. But
and they might be using the space for something else in the interim. Like whatever it was originally
planned for. Yeah. Like I don't think they dumped $125 million on this in the last 15 minutes. No.
Well, 2 months and change.
Yeah. That's how quick those go.
Well, no, I think we all can agree that it is a really cool concept. Let's see it. I mean, when we're talking about, what was the example that we saw? If North Korea shot 10 ICBMs or whatever, that was where they came up with the 16,000 number, where you would need 16,000 in order to be able to catch those 10 in time to provide any protection. Let's see what happens. Hey, you know what? Could be really cool.
I don't feel like this scenario is going to be cool if it happens. I don't think I would use that word.
Let's see if it happens. See if we get 48 in the air. All right. Our next most popular story: tariffs threaten survival of century-old Kashmiri carpet industry. Genuine hand-knotted Kashmiri carpets are usually made from pure silk, sometimes wool, which is more challenging. Generations have handed down the craft to ensure its survival, and while the carpets are expensive, most craftspeople barely make ends meet. The industry has survived decades of conflict over the disputed region between nuclear rivals India and Pakistan and withstood the fickleness of fashion to stay in demand. However, according to the AP, some of these Kashmiri carpet traders say that the president's tariffs on American imports could deal a harsh blow to an already threatened business vying to survive amid mass-produced carpets. Although the tariffs were primarily aimed at major exporters like China, they've inadvertently grabbed traditional handcraft industries from regions like Kashmir, which depend on U.S. and European markets to survive. Jeff, I think this is an unexpected example of the impacts of broad tariffs, but it's still possible that ongoing changes could be made in time to save some of these types of businesses.
Yeah, not to be unsympathetic here, this is kind of a tough example, I think, because it's a very specific, and there's a lot of people that are going to be going, really? Kashmiri carpets.
Well, but that's what I mean, like in terms of when we're looking at the big picture, when we're talking about how it needed to be more scalpel, this is the kind of fallout that you see where you're to many people, it's just like, all right. But like to, a niche market, it's a big deal.
Well, it also demonstrates, again, like you said, sort of the unforeseen impacts of these tariffs on some of these smaller countries and smaller industries. So there are going to be people who are impacted beyond just those producing the rugs, those who are importing it, those who are selling it, all of those types of dynamics. And it does illustrate sort of that trickle-down effect that these tariffs will have on a lot of different products that we didn't really think about. Mm-hmm. And that's why, as we've all stated here, these across-the-board approaches just don't work. This also sort of is a case study that can be applied to some things down the road. In a couple of months, 6 months, whatever it is, we're going to be looking at things like Canadian aluminum manufacturers and what type of impact these tariffs are having on those types of things. Because at the end of the day, regardless of where it's coming from, we need car doors, we need airplane wings, we need all of those types of things, and we don't have the infrastructure right now to move aluminum manufacturing to the U.S. within the next 18 months, okay? So how are those things going to impact? And if it's similar to what we're seeing on a micro level here, that's cause for greater concern in terms of a lot of the projections that are being made right now and how these tariffs are going to have a much larger term impact on bigger industries. So I think there's two ways to look at this. You can say, who cares about carpets coming from Kashmir? That doesn't affect me. Or you can say, this is sort of a shot across the bow and a warning in terms of what this could be down the road to much bigger, more prominent products and industries that we deal with every day. So we'll see what happens.
Anna, when you take a look at this story, do you think a story like this is dismissed because of the particular culture that it impacts?
Well, I don't know. I think it does shine a light. I know that it's not a broad-reaching product line. It is very niche, of course, but I think the point here is that there are these traditional industries that now exist in this global economy, and the consequences of our trade policies in not providing exemptions or policies that prevent them from being impacted by by these new regulations might cause them to disappear entirely from the planet. Like there are these very specific skill sets that only a few people in the world now have. And I think that they said that this legacy could, completely disappear if they start getting impacted by fewer sales, supply chain issues, all of that just kind of runs this entire industry into the ground. And it may not impact every person like aluminum does, but, it's a shame, I think, that this rich cultural history that has gotten swept up in the global economy is now really being subject to the whims of one person who holds a lot of cards, or one administration that holds a lot of cards. And I certainly don't think that the people that have the power to, say, carve out some sort of exemption to help protect traditional industries, which is what this article calls for as being the solution, they're not going to do that because I don't think that they place any value on that.
Or, that they want to.
Right.
Yeah.
Not to mention that if they did, it would just create this loophole that would be immediately exploited. And then soon,
Also true.
like Fritos corn chips would be a traditional industry because of lobbying, I mean, like,
Yeah.
but I think one takeaway from this, and people in the US, at least I know anecdotally, complain a lot about the quality of products that we buy these days and how they're not made the same as they used to be, and there's no craftsmanship anymore, and they break all the time, and this type of situation where they're saying like, what will actually happen is people will stop buying these rugs. They will be kind of forced economically to buy a knockoff or a lower quality product due to all the added costs that are being piled on. And so that's how we get crappier products.
Yeah.
Just in general, Yeah.
I mean, first and foremost, I want to talk about the immense impact that the Fritos corn chips have had on myself and my family for many generations, as well as the quality rugs that I often like to purchase from a grocery store parking lot. I really don't see a difference in quality, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just the amateur consumer there.
You have a new job in your sites here. I think you could lobby for the traditional industry.
Hopefully I'm not in the market anytime soon, but we'll give it a look. Jeff, one thing that bugs me, and actually I pitched this to both of you guys, is that there's a lot of talk about how when we talk about subjects like this, we just don't get that Trump's tariff flip-flopping is intentional and a fluid negotiating tool that is intended to improve jobs, inflation, and interest rates. I sometimes get discouraged that people don't understand that when you do these things, you need people in the industry to hold your foot to the flame to make sure it's working the way it's supposed to, right? I mean, or is it just like, hey, you know what? I think he's got it. And we'll see you on the other side in American Manufacturing Renaissance 3.0.
Well, now, again, not to keep beating this drum, but that's what we've always talked about don't go across the board. Try it in certain areas and see how it works.
Yeah.
Because when you're messing with global economies and global supply chains, they don't flop and transition that quickly. You can talk about pivoting all you want to. This isn't a pivot. This is a complete change of pace. So asking industry on any level to all of a sudden embrace this and just roll with it and go with it because longer term it's going to be better, that's unreasonable. Mm-hmm. That's not even being unreceptive or unwilling to change. That's just looking at the pure economic dynamics and realizing this doesn't make sense. We can't do this. That's what we're going to talk about this a little bit here. I think our next story. There's just practicalities that can't be looked past.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it really comes down to.
Yeah. It's just sometimes you hear the same beat of the same drum so many times and you're like, you gotta look a little bit more in depth than that.
Agreed.
To the far-reaching impact. Well, let's get into that next story, Jeff. 125-year-old truck maker is going to lay off up to 450 people in Cites tariffs. Mack Trucks is laying off hundreds at factories in Pennsylvania and Maryland. The maker of medium and heavy-duty trucks will cut 250 to 350 workers in Pennsylvania and 50 to 100 employees in Maryland that make heavy-duty diesel engines, transmissions, and drivelines. The 125-year-old company told Industrial Equipment News that heavy-duty truck orders have been negatively impacted by market uncertainty regarding freight rates and demand, possibly regulatory changes, as well as the impact of tariffs. The company told IEN's Nolan Beilstein that it needs to align production with the reduced demand for its vehicles, which are sold and serviced in nearly 30 countries. Anna, are these cuts too hasty? Should Mack have waited for the tough tariff talk, bargaining chips to settle at the bottom of the bag before doing something so rash?
Well, no. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to know exactly what position they're in or financially what they're feeling right now, but they may already be feeling the impacts of this. And one of the reasons I think is a company like Mack is getting kind of like a triple whammy here. So for one, its input costs for truck production go up, right? Two, its global sales are muddied, no doubt. And then three, this is a business that services the logistics industry. So if your customers are supply chain and logistics companies, there are already reports emerging about empty containers at ports and traffic declines of goods coming into the country. So factories to replace those goods didn't instantly pop up in the last 3 weeks. So fewer products, fewer shipments, less port traffic, intermodal gets impacted, trucking gets impacted. It's all getting impacted.
Mm-hmm.
S&P Global Mobility estimates that the net impact of tariffs on new U.S. commercial truck prices could be around 9%. If the tariffs were to last through the year's end, such an increase could reduce 2025 new commercial vehicle demand in the United States by as much as 17%. This would negate all expected growth this year and result in a down market. That's their look forward at the commercial truck market. So if you're seeing this and you're Mack, and you have all three of these things working against you, this could just be the first of the dominoes. I think that other commercial truck makers are facing tremendous pressures as well. Mm-hmm. And we might see more of this type of activity before this is through.
Jeff, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro on Tuesday said that the news is distressing, especially given that the company does, quote, everything right, including manufacturing in the United States. Mack Trucks said it was worried about economic uncertainty. And, I think that's something that everybody is worried about right now.
Yeah, we keep hearing how tariffs are such a beautiful word. Mm-hmm. Well, market uncertainty is not. And that is what's really driving all of this. It's not even about, yes, it's costing more to make the trucks and everything else. But what's really happening when you look at Class 7 and 8 vehicle sales right now, they're down across the board. It's not just Mack, it's Peterbilt, it's Freightliner, it's Volvo. Everybody is feeling this because it all goes back to those customers, like Anna was alluding to, not knowing what's going on. What product is going to be coming in? What can I source? If I don't have product to source, I can't make stuff. I can't deliver stuff. I don't need these trucks. Mm-hmm. That's what's at the core of all this. And you were talking before about wanting to get on board and, there's a bigger picture here. Well, we don't know what the picture is. When we have all this flip-flopping going back and forth, whether it's a negotiating tariff, whether it's trying to stimulate change, whatever the dynamic is, we don't know it. There's no plan. Kind of going back even to the Golden Dome executive order. There's no plan. Yeah. It's just, get me this. Yeah. We're doing this.
Yeah.
That isn't how the market works. You can be as practical and pragmatic as you want about all of these different entities, different social, different economic dynamics. There still needs to be some functional planning behind it so that the stakeholders, the powers that be, can get behind it and support it in some way. There's no way to do that here. Yeah. And as a result, you've got hundreds of U.S. workers feeling the pinch right here.
Well, and I understand that these policies are seen by a lot of people, as overall best for manufacturing and for all. But I think we can also agree that U.S. manufacturing is better with a Mack Trucks making trucks in Pennsylvania and Maryland.
The problem with what we're experiencing right now is, again, everybody wants more U.S. manufacturing, but the pain that it will take to get there does not allow us to get there.
Yeah,
we are not going to be able to weather this storm. There's just no way to do that. The amount of time that it would take, like when we started talking about these tariffs and what was going to be impacted, I thought it was going to take 6 months. It didn't even take 6 days.
Yeah,
but we just can't. There's just no way that the market can survive that long to see it through, to see the final result. That's what we're realizing right now.
Yeah. Well, our most popular story this week. I'm going real intense with the mic today. I just can't stop with the fiddling and the futzing. Our most popular story this week: Tesla accused of fudging odometers to avoid warranty repairs. According to accusations published by The Street, Tesla is deliberately fudging the mileage on its vehicle's odometers. In a report from Ben Munson, it appears the scheme could be an attempt to avoid paying for warranty repairs. A new lawsuit tells the story of a man who bought a used 2020 Model Y Tesla vehicle with 36,772 miles on it. He soon noticed, quote, peculiar patterns in mileage as the Y had problems with its suspension. He says he drove about 20 miles per day, but the odometer counted 72 miles per day. As a result, he said the basic warranty expired way ahead of schedule. The lawsuit says Tesla's odometer system relies on, quote, predictive algorithms, energy consumption metrics, and driver behavior multipliers that manipulate and misrepresent the actual mileage traveled by Tesla vehicles. By doing so, the automaker is accelerating the rate of depreciation and expiration of warranties for its vehicles. The lawsuit says, quote, by tying warranty limits and lease mileage caps to inflated odometer readings, Tesla increases repair revenue, reduces warranty obligations, and compels consumers to purchase extended warranties prematurely. And kind of skipping everything else that Tesla is facing and just focusing on the straight quality issues, what if Tesla just didn't know this was happening?
Yeah, to me, it seems hard to believe that this is a deliberate action on behalf of Tesla. And that's because, to me, it largely doesn't make business sense. If you look at it this way, so automakers make a lot more money when their vehicles hold their value well over time. It's pretty obvious why. If a relatively new vehicle that's still in good condition is priced a lot lower than the new models, then that gap is changing people's buying decisions, right? A new vehicle that's $10,000 more than a 2-year-old one, then, might spring for the new one. But if the new vehicle is $20,000 more than the 2-year-old one, then you might decide to buy that 2-year-old one, I think we know also that one of the biggest drivers of depreciation is higher mileage. And it's been documented that it's that first 36,000 miles or so that really hit it pretty hard. Typically when a new vehicle is still under a manufacturer warranty, right? So in essence, this claim is that Tesla is purposely accelerating the depreciation process, which I find hard to believe because, maybe it will save some money on warranty repair costs and force people to buy extended warranties, but it's not going to sell as many cars. It's not going to sell as many new cars. So I think the problem is yes, you have this downstream impact of devaluing your newer vehicles. And then B, it's incredibly high risk from a legal standpoint. If you were to get caught, what happens? And I would wager to guess, this is just a guess, but that the culture at Tesla right now could be a little bit wobbly. So, it could be maybe fertile ground for a whistleblower. I wouldn't do it. I don't think it makes sense. I don't think it's worth taking the chance on something like that. And this idea of a predictive odometer, that sounds absurd to me.
Yeah.
I think because it is if you, somebody refuted this. It's he's a big shareholder in Tesla. I don't know what his pedigree is exactly, but there is a predictive algorithm in electric cars that predicts your range based on your driving patterns. And he was like, that's what's predictive. The odometer is old technology. That's what everybody uses. It's just, if Tesla tried to change the odometer into a predictive device, that would be absurd. I doubt that's what's happening here.
Or it could have been done accidentally, with everything so relying on software and code. I mean, one thing it does sound like to me, it does sound like a touch of over-engineering where there is a discussion but what if? Not every mile is the same as another mile. So what if we had a better way of calculating a mile versus a harder mile? And I'm just, I'm trying to wrap my head around how this could even be a thing that, they would be an acceptable level of risk. And I think that mentality of sometimes when you think you're the smartest person in the room, sometimes ideas like this can kind of slip through the cracks because they're like, Jeff, I think you're onto something. Your mile is not the same as my mile. And honestly, that's probably pretty true. My mile is probably the harshest of this panel. And then I would wager maybe Jeff the Nana, but I really don't know. I mean, there might be something to that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be so dismissive of this.
Yeah.
I guess because, and I understand it's still a claim on the lawsuit, but when they talk about predictive algorithms, energy consumption metrics, and driver behavior multipliers manipulating the actual mileage, how do you even get there unless there isn't some technology in place to at least begin that conversation?
But that's the technology that tells you what your range estimate is.
I understand, but how is that? Again, this is a claim.
Yeah.
But to make that leap to how that's impacting the odometer has got to be the simplest piece of technology on any moving vehicle, whether it's a bike, a car, whatever. Why would there be anything touching the odometer?
It wouldn't. That's what I'm saying.
They can't just, again, it'll be proven and what it'll come out. But this is gaining steam. There's like a dozen people who have come forward. Again, a dozen. I'm not.
No, one person on the video claimed to drive 6 miles a day, had the car 6 months, and it said that he drove 9,000 miles.
This is what I'm saying. There's more people coming forward with this. Now, at a point, yes, can people be piling on?
Yeah.
Is this still 1 million people? No. But the way that this has picked up steam and gotten a lot of traction on a lot of mainstream news outlets does have me thinking a little bit and wondering a little bit. I could definitely see that conversation that you just mentioned taking place and saying, we're going to do this differently, more high tech. We're going to be more involved in how this, and in some cases it could probably help people.
Yeah. Oh, it'll definitely help people.
Yeah.
Because it's not helping. You know what? It's going to let the next person know how hard that car was driven. So really we're protecting our supply chain.
Or it could be accident. Yeah, I agree. I could see this. It could be an accident because you do have all this predictive technology that's in there, and somehow it got attached to the odometer, and it's influencing. We see bad data spitting out of machines all the time.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know. I'm not the technical guy here. All I see is this having more and more people getting on board. I saw an article in Business Insider where a woman said, when I first got my vehicle, I was noticing this stuff. Took it in to get it serviced. They were going to charge me all this money. I gave them proof as to how this was not exponentially, or this mileage was not possible. They waived the bill, cleared everything, and fixed it. So when you have these types of claims coming out there, it makes you think twice. And we see Elon's going back to Tesla.
Well,
I don't know, all in the same week. There's a lot of stuff moving here that makes you wonder if we haven't heard if this isn't just a flash in the pan lawsuit, like maybe there's something more to this.
Also, when we talk about code, like sometimes it can be as simple as a bracket wasn't shut. How many times have there been technical difficulties, and then it's just like, oh yeah, look at that.
Yeah.
It won't happen again. It's just like,
forgot a dash.
Yeah, it's crazier things have happened. Another comment said, weird, these cars have GPS that can provide a completely accurate mileage. Old-fashioned cars did a good job by just recording the rotation of the drive shaft.
Well, no kidding.
These are
okay, so fair enough, but I don't believe that this was a deliberate strategy to sell extended warranties. That's crazy to me.
No, agreed. But
I think there are way too many other negative impacts from this that would be.
But you have to be paying attention. You'd have to be able to actually see what's going on. How often do you look at your odometer? I don't.
I look at it all the time.
All the time?
Whoa. Yeah.
And really you're conscious of how many miles your vehicle has, and that makes sense with what you've driven?
I could tell you within probably 20 miles what is on my odometer.
No way.
I would say you are the exception more than the rule.
All right.
No, I'm the person that looks at the odometer and I'm like, okay, so I've got 14 miles to the next exit. That should be maybe 4 to 5 songs. And then I'm doing rough math. And then all of a sudden I'm an hour and a half away and I'm like, oh, I missed it.
No, what was it?
Yeah, or it was when your odometer's about to roll over to 100,000 miles, and you're like, oh, I want to see it, and you're just like, okay, in 10 minutes I gotta look down, and then you're like, I am 45 miles over. Whoops-a-daisy.
I feel like the bigger issue is you're distracted driving here.
No, it's I'm reinforcing my math skills while I'm driving. That's what's happening.
Impressive.
It's helping me. All right. Well, before we jump into, in case you missed it, the stories that weren't as popular on the websites, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward, we have another word from our brand new sponsor, Sugar CRM. This episode is brought to you by Sugar CRM. Many manufacturers sit on mountains of customer data. However, far too few sales teams leverage this data to unlock hidden sales opportunities, boost pipeline performance, and strengthen customer relationships. If your sales team is struggling to close deals, this new paper from Sugar CRM can be your introduction to modern, insight-driven sales. So download How to Close More Deals in Manufacturing. Right now, there is a link in the body copy and in the live chat right to the right of the video. All right. In case you missed it, stories maybe not as popular on the website, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward. Anna, let's start with you this week. What is your in case you missed it?
I selected a story about China and some new regulation around self-driving vehicles. So some new reports say that China has instituted a ban on certain words being used in advertising vehicles and their automated features. So descriptions include the terms smart, self-driving, and autonomous driving. They're not allowed anymore in advertisements for vehicles. Regulators have also at the same time updated a rule that will block auto companies from pushing features and improvements that are related to advanced driver assistance systems via software update. And instead, they need to get approval from the government agencies before doing so. So the move, they say in this report, reflects growing concern after several fatal accidents involving self-driving features have taken place. Tesla has already rolled out its full self-driving system in China, but because the system is not operational without human driver engagement, Chinese regulators have changed its name to Intelligent Assisted Driving.
Oh, okay. Still not bad.
Not bad, right. So the name change also comes on the heels of another regulatory roadblock for Tesla globally, this time in the UK, where the country's transportation department has banned most Tesla driver assist features, which claim to permit drivers to remove their hands from the steering wheel. So I picked this story because I think our entire panel over the years, we've pretty widely panned the name full self-driving for years and called for more, I think, transparency and maybe regulation around the name that can be easily misinterpreted as to its capabilities, and the impacts of that can be, I think, lethal. And we've seen that. Interesting to see, I think, that places are cracking down. That's why I wanted to bring this to the attention of our audience, because we've talked about this name in the past, where I don't expect any cracking down to be happening here exactly. So it was interesting to see some of these other countries push back a little, and not just on Tesla either. The reason this came about in China, the report said, was because a Chinese automaker's driver assist system was involved in a fatal crash where somebody hit a tree. So interesting to see countries look at these terms and make sure that they're not being used in a fast and loose way, and that there's a little bit more regimented look at how they're being thrown out there. And so I don't expect it here, but
no, but I mean, to your point, it's something we've been talking about for years now.
Right.
And we're talking about a change in terminology. You know, I was just talking to a family member, and somebody else in the family bought a Tesla, and it was just like, oh, you should see it. It's pretty sweet. You know, they got the full self-driving. And I'm like, no, it is not self-driving. It is driver assist. Like,
you be careful.
Make sure Matt pays attention. All right. I mean, Jeff, this is something that we've kind of advocated for a long time. And honestly, to Anna's point, it's kind of frustrating to be like, well, at least it's happening elsewhere.
Yeah, I think I need a moment to pause and meditate here a little bit, because I've been super critical of a Republican president, and now I'm going to applaud a Chinese public communications policy. I don't know what's going on here.
What happened to Jeff?
Well, the next story will help me feel better. But anyway, no, I 100% agree with you guys. It's about time. Yeah. And this should be replicated all over. So,
all right. Well, in case you missed it this week, Ocean Navigator fire traced to shoddy maintenance. On October 9th, 2023, the Ocean Navigator passenger vessel began a 10-night cruise from Montreal to Boston with 128 passengers and 82 crew members aboard. 9 days later, the vessel was docked in Maine when a fire broke out in the engine room, causing $2.4 million in damage. The NTSB released a report this week that traced the fire to debris in the engine's lube oil system, which led to a catastrophic mechanical failure. Just before the fire, 2 crewmen were performing maintenance in the engine room when they discovered a small lube oil leak on an auxiliary engine. The third engineer told the NTSB, quote, "The bolt was loose and we could see it turning." The pair then ran to get tools to tighten the bolt, but when they returned and sat beside the engine, quote, "it exploded and fire immediately spread across and above the generator." The motorman's coveralls even caught fire, and he suffered burns on about 40% of his body. Third-party technicians were brought in following the fire to tear down the engine, and they found significant damage. NTSB investigators determined that the debris in the engine's lube oil system, which caused the failure, was possibly caused because the crew exceeded manufacturer recommendations for changing the lube oil and oil filter. The crew last changed the entire quantity of lube oil for the engine in September 22, about 13 months before the engine failure. However, the engine operated for more than 5,000 hours with this lube oil, 5 times longer than recommended. Since the filter was changed, the engine had run more than 3,000 hours, or 3 times longer than recommended. Now, I think it's obvious why I picked this story, because it's another opportunity for everyone to go and, grab themselves a cup of coffee and a Werther's and enjoy themselves a nice NTSB report cover to cover, because it's a good read. But also, as the NTSB says, manufacturers provide maintenance recommendations and intervals to ensure equipment operates safely, optimally, and reliably through its service life. And don't skimp on it. It just shows how even when you think about simple things as skipping oil change schedules, you don't think of what could really happen. And then all of a sudden something catastrophic happens. And honestly, Jeff, it was because of the efforts of the entire crew that this wasn't a much more severe problem. But still, somebody was very severely injured, and there were millions of dollars in damage.
That had to be terrifying.
Yeah.
I mean, just to see, we just got to tighten this bolt.
Yeah, you walk in and the bolt's turning.
Well, and then, just that split second and you're covered and surrounded by fire. I think the biggest takeaway for me with these stories, especially when it relates to manufacturing, and this is basically manufacturing, this is a facility on water.
Yeah.
I mean, so I don't think it's ever really about the money or the financial elements, which certainly come into play. It's not cheap to replace and do maintenance, but I think it's the time savings. I think that's what usually comes into play here. These folks are busy. They don't want to stop. They don't want the downtime associated with maintaining equipment, in this case, the engine. Mm-hmm. And that's what leads to these horrible catastrophes. It's that extra time element that people just want to push through, get the job done. We'll do that later. It gets keep them pushed down the road. And then something horrible happens.
Well, and I think a part of this too is that, Anna, we're talking about an industry that was shut down for 2 years for COVID, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think when you look at something that happened in early 2023, I think the focus might have also been on all right, we're back in business. We got to start making money again. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I just, when it comes to, I hate to say it, the blocking and tackling, you got to do it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, nothing works.
I also wonder too how kind of weirdly loaded the word recommendation is, because it sort of indicates that it's a choice.
Oh, that it's optional, yes.
Mm-hmm. And I know that folks often look at regulation and they think those suggestions are guidelines, but maybe not a requirement.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times have you heard someone say, well, the best by date is something that they have to put on there? You know? Which I'm sure that it is. They have to pick a date.
Yeah.
But is that in your mind when you're looking at these manufacturers' recommendations here, and you just think it's just some sort of arbitrary stamp that has to be done to fit within these guidelines? I don't know. Which is kind of scary prospect if you consider that that's it's where our heads are.
That would be interesting to look into, the origin of the term manufacturer's recommendations and why it was never manufacturer's mandate.
Yeah, and yeah, everyone's like, well, of course they're gonna say that.
Yeah,
they want you to buy more oil.
True. All right, Jeff, what do you have for in case you missed it this week?
I wanted to go a little bit more lighthearted with this one, especially the stories we had this week. They got me fired up a little bit.
I know.
So, no, it's good stuff. It's good conversation. But I picked a story talking about Kellanova launching a Miller Lite-Flavored Pringles. Now, David, I know you're not a fan of beer. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about Pringles, though?
I do like Pringles. To a fault. And
okay. I thought you were going to get weird.
No, I'm not going to get weird. Okay. I do like Pringles. And I mean, I will, I'm also a sucker for a novelty flavor. So I will buy at least one canister of these. You'll likely find it in the office, half full.
Well, here we go, because they're not only coming with a Miller Lite flavored beer, they're also going to introduce beer can chicken and grilled beer brat flavors just in time for summer. They're talking about Miller Lite's hoppy malt beer aroma. Now, I love beer.
Yeah.
I drink all kinds of beer. It's never for the aroma. I've never thought about that. I think we've gotten to this point, and, very proud of my German heritage here. We put beer in everything. We've got beer cheese, beer bread, beer brats. All these things I'm on board with. Beer chips even.
Yeah.
I'm cool with, even though I think you could have done a little better than Miller Lite. Like, that's hardly a beer.
Yeah, I think you're just,
in my opinion.
you're going for reach.
Right. But this has gotten out of hand when it comes to the things we're infusing beer in. I'm going to throw some stuff at you. Anna, I know, drinks beer. You do not. But, Anna, how do you feel about beer-flavored chocolate?
Ooh. I mean, I would try it. It's not my first,
That doesn't seem to...
Doesn't seem to
right
pair,
me.
does it? Yeah.
Could I say, a lot of these things all come down to a combination of sweet and salty to me. So, when, beer
should be
Pringles.
neither.
I know, but beer Pringles, that's adding a little bit of sweet to salty already. When you say beer chocolate, then you're adding a little bit more of the, the salt to the chocolate. So, I don't know,
Beer's not salty, David.
I don't know. I don't drink a lot.
It's not.
David doesn't know anything about beer.
I was going to say that.
It's not salty,
No.
but it is sweet at times.
It's a liquid. I can bring one in if you.
Okay.
If you've never seen it, I'll bring one in.
Yeah. I don't know. I hear so often when I'm hanging out with my bros at the bartender spot about how they're drinking all these salty beers.
So I got another one for you. How about beer-flavored ice cream?
Why though?
No.
There is beer-flavored ice cream. There is even a product out there that you can use to get the smell of beer infused into whatever you're making.
Okay.
Again, that's not the reason I love beer.
Yeah. Can I just have the beer?
So
that's it.
It's just, I can appreciate, I love Pringles. I think the chips in the beer, total great fit. But this other stuff, we're going too far, guys. Just have a beer.
I think those brat Pringles are going to be a winner. At least in Wisconsin.
I mean, it's great marketing. If you're
Yeah.
coming out with something you call it a grilled beer brat potato chip, I mean, yeah.
Yeah. I
want to walk away from that.
I can hear Bob Euchre's voice promoting these during the Brewer broadcast, just like Miller Lights,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so you don't like beer. Do you still eat all the other beer flavored things?
No, I don't. And I mean, this is an overshare, but I often kiss a person that likes beer. And so I'm familiar with the beer taste. And I was just like, well, that on a chip, maybe if they made a Bud Light chip, I don't know. I'm drawn from not a deep well there. I'm just like, well, they're making a Bud Light one.
I'll stop right there. I can't.
Yeah.
I can't. Yeah.
Well, before we get out of here this week, let's jump into our final thoughts. Anna, what's your final thought?
So as David mentioned, we have a new pup in our house. His name's Dante. He moved in with us on Saturday, and he is a super serious chewer of dog toys. And our previous dog was not a chewer, so I don't know anything about this. I thought I could throw some Kong plushies at this dog and we would be cool, but he is in Shred Town with those. So send me your recommendations for toys that will survive the day. I would be anything longer than a day. I'm cool with putting the money into, because so far we've gone through some toys.
Yeah.
And he is not a Mastiff or a Pit Bull or anything. He's 25-pound terrier, but he's really into the chewing up
incredibly destructive for such a small animal.
For sure. Don't get it. But
no, it's I had mentioned it earlier, but I have not met a dog toy that said it was indestructible or could last forever that lasted more than a day. It's just
that's what I'm afraid of. But
talk about planned obsolescence.
I know.
They bank on that.
Yeah.
And I totally apologize. As soon as I asked you about it at the intro, I'm like, I bet I'm ruining your final thought.
That's okay.
So for my final thought this week, I kind of teased about it a little bit last week, but there were some pretty serious ice storms up north in northern Wisconsin and just did incredible damage up there. And, we went up there to put the pier in a couple weeks ago, and, there was still a significant amount of ice on the water, so we didn't make it. But, since we were up there, it was kind of nice to just hang out. And then we noticed that the top of the chimney on the wood burner was a little off kilter, was knocked off. So I just jump up on the I jump up on the roof and I fix that, and then we're patching holes on the roof, and then we see all the brush laying around, and I'm just like, hey, we got a new electric saw for the cottage for Christmas, cottage gift. That's a totally normal thing. And so I just start burning the brush, right? And it was kind of a windy day, but it was kind of creating this cool effect because the smoke was like really running up against the tree in front of, we have 2 major trees in front of the cottage. And the way it was blowing up against it, it was kind of like cascading off of the bark. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted other people to see this because I thought it was really cool. It looked like the smoke was being blown inside the tree, and then it was kind of coming out these 2 woodpecker holes at the top. And so I go and get my wife and my sister-in-law, and I'm like, you guys got to see this. And as we walk around the cottage, I see flames coming out from the inside of a tree, like coming like just blasting out around it. And I'm like, the tree is on fire. And I will say, like, reinforce that we are teaching my son very well because he was the first one, 7 years old, to get a bucket. Second of all, never knew you could set a tree on fire from the inside out. And it was just that the wind was blowing perfectly. There was a little hole where like flying squirrels had like created a winter den in there, which started on fire. And then after so we basically, as we put out the flame with buckets, my brother grabbed the hose and we threw that in the top woodpecker hole and just kind of like created this very elegant fountain. But we got the fire out. Mm-hmm. And then we were all very quiet for a while and went and ate our stress. And as we were, all of a sudden, my dad and my brother are like, I hear that these are notoriously difficult to put out. And so we went, packed the holes so that way we could fill the tree with water just to make sure everything was out.
Oh, man.
And this was something that pretty universally, other than a tree getting hit by lightning, people hadn't heard of. And that was the first one for me. Like, I don't know if anyone's ever set a tree on fire from the inside out, but I don't recommend it. It sounds terrifying. Stressful. Very stressful.
That is crazy.
Yeah, wow. A lot of dairy dips after that. Yeah. The Fritos that play a big role. Mm-hmm. So if anyone out there has a tree that they think is hollow and maybe inhabited by other ants or other life form, make sure it's nowhere near an open flame. Maybe if that's the tree where people smoke, during Thanksgiving and they're just throwing cigarette butts down there. I don't know how else this is going to happen. It was a perfect storm as to how we caught it on fire.
So you have to take that tree down now too, right?
Oh, yeah. She's coming down next Wednesday. Yeah, it was, because it was just no more fires ever until it's down.
Oh, God, yeah.
But it was the scariest thing I've gone through in a while because this tree is 50 feet tall, even like, it's so big you can't, like the 2 of us together couldn't get our arms around it. So it's like a lot of healthy tree there, but it's dead inside. So have you ever heard something like that?
No, but I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, as soon as you started talking about this, I'm like, oh, geez.
Yeah. And from how small the holes were at the bottom, it was a lot of flame coming up and around. Yeah. If it wasn't my place, very cool. So, interesting way to take a tree down too, I guess. Yes. What's your final thought this week, Jeff?
Well, I appreciate all the work that is going on product development from a jelly bean perspective after Easter Sunday, because my favorite candy has always been like the peanut butter chocolate eggs. Those are always the best.
Oh, yeah.
But I've always liked the specifically the Jolly Rancher jelly beans, but the blue raspberry jelly beans, easily my favorite now. Probably because part of it is weird because it's like a totally manufactured flavor. Like there's no blue raspberry. I understand this, but definitely become my favorite. So look out for those. I would you gotta look past all the others. Get the Jolly Rancher jelly beans.
So this is a new flavor in the Jolly Rancher bag.
It's not new. It's just like really came home.
Just hits hard this year.
Yeah.
Man, we have a.
Then my daughter started stealing all of them.
Oh,
so I kicked her out of the house.
Yeah.
You're no longer welcome, and exactly. I know you can safely go somewhere else.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll make sure there's more of those in your basket next year, Jeff. Before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at in.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. For Jeff Rinke and Anna Wells, I'm David Manty. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast, and we will see you next week.